NFTs and Activism, Making a Difference with NFTs. We have, I am going to butcher your name, Thanasi, Dilos, Danielle Mclaughlin, Lyndon, Burford, I am so sorry, and Medved. I think Matt is the only one I didn't butcher, so it's good to see you too. Thank you, and come on down. And there's an extra mic down in the back there, so.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to NFTs and Activism, Making a Difference with NFTs. We got a great panel for you. We're going to kick things off with just a brief round of introductions so everybody knows everyone. I'm Matt Medved, co-founder and CEO of NFT Now, a premier publication for NFT coverage and curation. And this cause is very close to my heart because prior to getting into NFTs and even prior to getting into media, I actually worked in the nonprofit sector for a nonprofit called Search for Common Ground, doing human rights field research in the conflict resolution context in Nigeria. So seeing how NFTs can unlock a whole new level of social good and impact is something that I'm very excited about, and we've got some incredible panelists to chat more about it. So why don't we just go around and everyone give a little introduction, and then we'll get into the topics.
I didn't know you worked for Search. We do so much. That's why I don't do my research very well. My name is Thanasi. I'm a co-founder of a traditional nonprofit called Civics Unplugged. We work with 1,000 fellows a year from 74 different countries in all 50 states, talking about civic innovation, so how you can use emerging technology to benefit your communities. Nothing about crypto, and we deploy about $250,000 into their youth-led projects around the world every year. In November, we launched something called the Dream Dao, which was for a small selection of those young people to enter Web3 and have the funding and mentorship and the ability to work at the intersection of Web3 and social impact. So right now, most of my focus is on getting the funding, but also the mentorship and support for a lot of these amazing young people getting into huge crypto companies and really changing the world through the tech.
Thanks, Thanasi. My name's Danielle Mclaughlin. I'm a co-founder of Path Collective. I'm a recovering lawyer. Don't hold that against me, but it has come in handy from time to time. We exist, and with my co-founder here, Lyndon Burford, we exist at the intersection of Web3 and humanitarian nuclear disarmament. And a couple of things that of the sort of the 5 facets of our work, there are a couple of things I'd like to quickly introduce. One is that we're building NFTs. We're getting alongside survivor communities. Communities have been impacted by the nuclear weapons centuries, to elevate their voices, to help them tell their stories, and truthfully to bring nuclear weapons back into our cultural and political conversations, because we have forgotten about them. They were built in our name and they are pointed at us, and we really believe that Web3 and this community is really perfectly poised to move the dial on that. The other piece of work that I'll quickly introduce is work in ESG and CSR. Every corporation on the face of this planet has a position on nuclear weapons and its injustice, but no one's asked them to step into the light and take a position on it. And we also think that this community, we're disruptors, right? We have a healthy dose of anti-establishmentism, and we firmly believe and are working towards building nuclear non-proliferation into CSR and into ESG programs.
Hey, my name is Lyndon Burford. So I've 18 years in nuclear disarmament research. So I look at identities, policies, politics, technologies. And basically, my mission has been how do we get rid of the nuclear weapons? Because they're threatening all of us. Bit of context, we're currently in a nuclear arms race. Not sure if you guys knew that, but we're currently in the early stages of a new multi-country nuclear arms race. So this issue is back on the table. What I've found in that world in 18 years is that there is just stagnancy, a lack of innovation, gatekeepers everywhere, entrenched financial positions, and we live in a permanent nuclear war economy, which basically means that if you support nuclear weapons, you can get very, very rich. The cost to all of us, though, is that every moment of every day, we are quite literally only ever 1 hour away from nuclear war. So Path Collective exists to flip that script. We're here to make peace profitable, as you can see. We approach nuclear disarmament through a humanitarian lens, so that is to say, working alongside communities that have been impacted to allow them to uplift their own stories, to bring their own voices to these issues. And we believe, as Danielle was saying, that Web3 has the ability to disrupt a lot of those entrenched systems. And we're here today to talk about it. So thanks for having us.
There it is. No, great perspectives all around. So, you know, for me, one of the moments that really was kind of like a light bulb moment that kind of helped me understand and unlock the potential of this technology for good was watching the community's response to the war in Ukraine and seeing Ukraine DAO in partnership with Nadia from Pussy Riot and Trippy and the like really mobilize to raise more than $7 million for relief in a matter of days in a way that just would not have been possible with all the traditional red tape, yellow tape, bureaucracy that accompanies the international organizations in the NGO world as I knew it, you know, having done my work. And just seeing how people could come together in a decentralized manner around a common cause and really create impact was incredibly inspiring. So I'd love to chat a little bit about the utility of this technology, how we can apply this to actually make a change, and how each of your organizations are doing that, or how you're seeing it being done, respectively.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. Virtue signaling works. If you notice the Ukraine thing, once Ukraine kind of announced that you were going to get an airdrop if you donated money, their donations skyrocketed, and then they ended up rugging everybody, but it's okay. But their donation skyrocketed because everybody thought that they were going to get this badge, that they supported this amazing cause. And to me, I think that's a beautiful thing, no matter what the human nature is behind it. And it's something that nonprofits in the traditional world have been really slow to get to, right? Coming from the traditional nonprofit space, a lot of nonprofits are not tech forward. They don't really care about culture. They don't really care about emerging tech. They just think about fundraising as, I'm going to go to this big donor, this big foundation. I'm going to give you my KPIs that I totally lied about, that are not verified. And I'm going to get some money, and I'm going to keep going. I don't care about innovation. I don't want to take the risk. And I think what we've seen with crypto is not just the ability to move massive amounts of money, but really the ability to galvanize hundreds of thousands of people around a mission that they can prove they were a part of. It gets them so connected to something that they would never have been connected to before, which is what we do. Like at the Dream Dao, you get a Skywalker for supporting a kid. You can get an NF tree for supporting trees. It's great. So we call it virtuous signaling, but...
Yeah, we'll take it. I'll just add to Thanasi's point, you know, for years and years and years, in our field and others, we talk about funding for these really important social justice, climate issues as people who are working in the spaces are bringing a knife to a gunfight, right? So in our field, the annual spending on nuclear weapons is about $82 billion. And if you're trying to like fight that complex, it's exceedingly hard because you're scratching around and you're fighting with other people working in that space to get the money to do the work to kind of take that system down. So what Web3 and NFTs particularly give us this opportunity is to monetize the stories that aren't being told, the stories that fly in the face of the system that has been built and is constantly perpetuating itself, and bring people along, tell the stories, raise the funding, take it to the man. Thank you, NFTs.
Very much. So to put that in a bit of context, a lot of people know the names Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are the two Japanese cities that were bombed at the end of World War II using nuclear weapons. But actually, that's two explosions. We've actually had more than 2,000 nuclear weapons tested around the world. So what has that done? That has devastated communities around the world. And unsurprisingly, given the situation or the world that we live in, who are those communities? Well, sadly, they're mostly communities of color, indigenous communities. Often, women and girls are more impacted by the impacts of nuclear testing. We don't quite know why yet, but the science tells us that radiation affects women and girls more negatively than men. Now, that might be because the reference man that we started using was a white middle-aged male, and so all of our reference data relates to that, not to women's bodies. We're not sure. But these communities around the world have been devastated, and they don't have money precisely because they are at the margins of society, that they're at the margins of our power hierarchies. And so what we're trying to do is find ways that we can use this incredible and revolutionary new technology to allow them to empower themselves, to tell their own stories in their own ways, to own the IP, to generate sustainable revenue streams that mean they don't keep having to go to their governments begging for money for a new medical center because their birth, defect rates are through the roof because of all this nuclear testing. They can just do it themselves. And so that's the vision. That's a sort of change we're trying to make it on the humanitarian level. So it's early days for us. We launched in Times Square a few weeks ago. We issued a POAP. We tried to go into Times Square and issue a POAP. This is it, actually. Our partner, our co-founder, Rob Baker, who's an incredible digital artist, created a POAP for us. And we went into Times Square and issued that and talked to people on the street. It was really fun. And so the next step is towards first a set of fine art collections, working with artist communities who want to have an impact and address some of these humanitarian issues with us.
No, I think you make some really great points there. And when we founded NFT Now, the mission is to empower the creators of culture and help drive mainstream adoption of NFTs. And that latter part is really critical because if you go, you'll see that education is a really big part of what we do. We're all about not just preaching to the choir, but really converting the masses, bringing new people in. And I think that's a really key thing, especially as we think about NFTs and activism of NFTs and making a positive impact, is really bringing new people in, bringing in these communities and demographics that have largely been who have been sidelined prior. We often talk about the opportunities that there is in Web3 to build a better future without the same entrenched hierarchies and inequities that have existed in Web 2 and for generations before. But that's not just going to happen by waving a magic wag me wand or anything like that. We have to be very proactive, very intentional about inclusion. And I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about how we can really be proactive in doing so and in building that future.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, we want to make sure that we do that right. And so if we're approaching this particular issue of nuclear weapons and nuclear threats from a humanitarian perspective, it's important to recognize the place of privilege that I come from, right? So I don't think it's for me to tell any of these communities what they should be doing or how they should be telling their stories. And so for us, it's about building partnerships that can bridge into those worlds where there are trusted people that those communities trust that we can work with. And then the second piece is around, as you said, education. So currently, we as Path Collective, we sit at the intersection of Web3 and humanitarian nuclear disarmament, but there is no crossover. We're trying to bridge that world. And over here we have nuclear nerds like myself who have just gone around in circles for decades, never making any progress. And over here we have Web3 and there's just no connection. So we're trying to do education in both directions. We're trying to tell all the crypto kids that there is this issue that you really, if you care about climate change, you should care about nuclear weapons. Because a nuclear war would cause catastrophic overnight climate change, right? And climate change is making nuclear war more likely by generating conflicts around the world. So we're trying to do that education to educate the crypto land about that, and then on the flip side, to educate the nuclear nerds like myself about this incredible new technology that has all of this potential through individual financial sovereignty, through all of these things that are we talk about in the crypto world, but we don't talk about in the nuclear world. So I guess that would be my answer to that.
You know what, I'd just add that it's the partners that we seek out and the artists that we seek to work with. In 1974, I couldn't have gotten a credit card in my own name as a married woman in this country. So just kind of put a pin in that. We've come so far, but we still have so far to come. But I would just add to Lyndon, it's about partners and working with people who are with these communities on the ground and not making any assumptions, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that you can create a diverse community without having one from the beginning. And when we had Civics Unplugged when we started, right, we have our community of alumni is 74% young women, 70% non-white. They're from all of these different countries. But we had this discussion on crypto in the late summer of last year, and the critique was, well, everybody looks like you in the crypto space, and it's kind of pointless. And I was like, that's 100% right. Everyone in the crypto space and the majority of people in the crypto space look like me, they think like me, and that, I think, is the problem, because it's not just going to be a bunch of people like me saying, well, I'm going to create a diverse community, because that's just not how it works. So what we did at Dream Dao was we literally just gave these kids the money and the tech, and we were like, okay, build the community from the jump. we want the community to look more like you than it does like me. We want the community to act more like you, to think more like you, and that's what happened. Right now, I think the Dream Dao is one of the most diverse, both geographically, by gender, by ethnicity, communities in Web3, and it's because we had the community before we brought in the technology. I think right now a lot of people are coming to Web3 thinking that if they launch an NFT project, they're going to bring this community along with them, and everybody's going to come, and it's going to be this like happy-go-lucky thing, and that's just not how it works. You have to start with a community that you've already founded, with a North Star, with values, with morals, with principles, and then you can use the technology to level it up, to incentivize more interaction, to reward more participation. But you can't just put these like intense tokenomics papers and like this like huge big brain idea of a community and slap an NFT on it and say, well, we're changing the world, because that's just not, it's never how it worked.
No, great points all across. You know, I think you make a great point too. You know, we all got in this with mission-driven values, right? And I'm sure there are plenty in the audience who have causes that they believe in, but may not know where to start. And may be wondering, how can I leverage this technology to support and advance the causes I believe in? So through the lens of your own work, I'm curious to hear what advice you'd have for them as they kind of look to enter the space and make a real meaningful impact.
I mean, I would join a DAO. I would think about an issue that you care about and see if there is a DAO that is working to advance that cause, and buy an NFT. A lot of the DAOs, and you can speak to your own, obviously, Thanasi, the price of entry is really low, but it's this very genuinely collective way of getting involved in the tech, of getting involved in a community that wants to do good things, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way the Dream Dao works is every time an adult buys a Skywalker, a young person gets it. So we give the assets for free, and I think that's a great way to think about onboarding your communities if you already have one, right? Price of entry into crypto in general is super high, and you lose a lot of money, it's a lot of risk. So how can you get free assets and learnings to those people? Like you said, education is really important. Then I also think, think about your community and what they really value and how much of the technology you want to bring in. Does everyone need a Discord? I don't think so. Does everyone need this like cool piece of art to represent their community? I don't think so. Maybe you just need the ethos of Web3, which is incentives and values and communities working together, collaboration, transparency. Maybe you just need to onboard those morals into your community. Maybe you don't even need the technology. That's been more of where my brain is at, because I think there's so many nonprofits who can like do really well by just adopting the morals and the ethos of Web3 without having to build these like complex tech structures.
Yeah, I would say hold true to your values and education, because there's a lot of misinformation. There are some genuine concerns, and there is a lot of misinformation about this space. But I guess the values that this technology makes it possible to express, of decentralization of power, of transparency, of accountability. Like, we know that that's possible on the blockchain, but it's not inevitable. Like, we have to do that. We have to build the DAOs, build the systems that actually express those values. And so I think in terms of the onboarding question, like, to me it feels like there's no easy answer other than do the hard work. Like, A, hold to your values and build for those values, and B, educate about the fact that it is possible to express those values through this technology, and that there are people out there like all of yourselves and like the people on this panel who are trying to do that, And yeah, I'm afraid I'm not sure there's any easy answer, but like that's my approach to it.
There are usually never easy answers to tough and overarching questions, but I think that's why we're all working to do what we're doing. It's a really interesting thing when we think about the future of activism, right? And we all in our respective roles have done work with legacy NGOs, nonprofits, organizations. I'm curious, what are you seeing from that world when it comes to Web3? Are you seeing interest, understanding, confusion, complete ignorance? And how does that look right now? And B, where do you see that going? Do you think that there's a role for these existing long-standing organizations 10, 15 years from now? Or do you think that they'll be supplanted by more nimble Web3 native DAOs or organizations, et cetera? I'm curious just to get your temperature check there.
I don't think anything will replace the work on the ground, these really grassroots organizations that are impacting people in the physical world. I do, though, we do a lot of work with Reform. Robert can't make it, but they're one of the largest criminal justice I guess, activists, but also legislative reform, all of that in the country. They're amazing. You should check them out. But they're super interested in harnessing Web3 because the communities that they work with people who have been debanked by the criminal justice system. They work with people who cannot access digital communities. They work with people who really want to find a new way for financial independence. And so it really fits their mission. But we've been working, because Civics Unplugged had a lot of partners before we dropped into Web3, we've been working with a lot of nonprofits that were very skeptical, but because they saw a trusted entity move into the space, they wanted to learn. So I think on your point of onboarding, going back to it, is like if you have this trusted entity, like folks like NFT Now, folks like yourselves, that can be the stewards, that can take the risk, I think a lot of these legacy nonprofits will follow. I don't think they're going anywhere. I do think they're going to be forced to evolve, both in the way they think about the world, but also in the technologies they use.
You know, I would second that. You know, the American Red Cross has been accepting cryptocurrency since about 2014. So, you know, you can't put the Web3 genie back in the bottle. So I think our job, and certainly part of our mission, is to do the education piece. So, you know, Matt, you said, you know, are they scared? Are they afraid? Are they excited? Are they skeptical? Yes, all of the above. And so, and understandably, like they see the volatility. There's a lot of there's just a lot that they don't know. So getting alongside them, as you say, bringing along trusted entities, educating them on all of it, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, and just letting them see. The Red Cross is a great example for, you know, for the organisations that we're working with, that this isn't going away. So we want to bring them along and help them be a part of helping to build this new system that also reflects their values.
Yeah, I would say for the last couple of years, I've really struggled to get people in my particular field to listen to me. They're like, oh, I see you're moving your mouth, but the words, like, what is it that's coming out of your mouth? But in terms of NGOs and funding, like, starting to get some interest at the margins, yeah, like starting to have some interesting conversations. There's nothing public, there's just no public conversation about Web3 at all in my world of nuclear disarmament policy. But starting to have some conversations in the background, which is interesting, and hopefully those lead somewhere. And truly, because we desperately need it, there were 5 big philanthropic organizations that have been funding people that do my kind of work for the last decade or so. 2 of them just left the field, and they were basically like, whatever, like throw up their hands, like this is not changing. I'm like, well, it has to change because the risk is ever present, and it dovetails with all of these other issues that we care about. Your climate, gender equity, like Black Lives Matter, undoing the harms of colonialism, like all of these issues intersect with nuclear weapons because the mines are all on indigenous land, the tests were all done on indigenous lands or near communities of color, like all of these issues. So people are starting to see that there's utility in this world, but we've got a long way to go.
For sure, and I think one thing that really helps people understand better is when you can kind of ground them in like real-world examples, right? And you're like, this, because the ideas of Web3, NFTs, et cetera, can be very amorphous concepts for a lot of people. I mean, I've been dabbling in crypto since 2013. I did the crypto learning curve then. I still had to do the NFT learning curve in 2020, and there are a lot of people doing both at once, and that could be very daunting, right? So, I know we talked about a couple examples, Ukraine DAO, Dream DAO, et cetera. I'm curious, what are some other examples, perhaps, that you've seen of this technology at play in a way that's really been socially impactful and also could perhaps be used to help, like, when people are like, how can this actually make an impact? These are some like concrete examples that we can point to, and it can also inspire people for their own causes.
I'm aware we're short on time, so I'll just say quickly.
Last question.
Constitution DAO, I thought was amazing. And that really shows what you can do when you already have community that has come together around shared values, right? So Constitution DAO, and then also the work that Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis are doing, like Stoner Cats, the gimmicks, user-funded and generated digital content that's really interesting, that gives people a stake in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go further from the fundraising piece. Like, the actual technology is so impactful. I know at Stanford they're doing research on how to create a camera that allows journalists in conflict areas to take pictures and literally NFT those pictures before they get uploaded to prove that the pictures they are taking have not been edited. And imagine if we had that technology with what was going on in Ukraine right now, we'd have absolved all of this misinformation crisis that's been happening in the United States, but globally. So I think the last thing I'll say is look past the fundraising piece for nonprofits. I think the technology can really aid impact work and the misinformation crisis and all of these things that we're dealing with.
I'm just going to second that, because we've got 5 seconds left.
Well, we are out of time. Give it up for our panelists. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for NFTs and activism, making a difference with NFTs. Thank you. And Kyle, who do we have coming up next?